Chapter 1. The Quiet Life. A human father and a newborn alien hybrid. The small village of Sequoia Ridge lay nestled among towering trees that reached so high they seemed to pierce the clouds. The village was a stark contrast to the high-tech, bustling spaceports Marcus Hale had once called home. Here, nature ruled and technology was limited to what was necessary for survival. Water filtration systems, basic atmospheric controls, and aging farming machinery. For Marcus, this quiet life was both a blessing and a curse. It was a place to escape his past and the heartbreak that still haunted him, but it also meant isolation, and isolation made even more poignant by the responsibilities he carried alone. At the heart of his small, cluttered workshop, a cradle sat beside a worn workbench. In it lay a tiny alien child with lavender skin and silvery hair that shimmered faintly in the light. Alara, his 3-year-old daughter, was the most important part of his life, a bright, curious, and resilient child who was unlike anyone else in the village. Alara was a hybrid, born of a human father and an alien mother. Her mother, Kailani, had been a woman of extraordinary beauty and grace, hailing from the Tavani race, a species known for their ethereal appearance and mysterious connection to energy fields. But Kailani had also been a woman with secrets, and those secrets had pulled her away from Marcus and Alara 3 years ago, leaving Marcus to raise their child alone. The struggles of a single father. Raising Alara had not been easy. As a hybrid, she faced unique challenges that Marcus often felt ill-equipped to handle. Her physiology was different from that of a human child. She grew faster, her energy levels fluctuated unpredictably, and her luminous eyes sometimes glowed faintly in the dark, a trait that unsettled some of the more superstitious villagers. But Marcus loved her fiercely. He had learned to navigate the complexities of caring for her, from crafting a custom nutrient blend that mimicked her mother's milk to designing a small atmospheric stabilizer for her room to simulate the conditions of her mother's home planet. The villagers, while generally kind, kept their distance. Alara's otherworldly appearance and the whispers about Kailani's sudden disappearance had made Marcus and his daughter the subject of quiet speculation. Some saw them as a curiosity, others as a cautionary tale. But Marcus didn't care what they thought. His world revolved around Alara. Memories of Kailani. At night, when Alara was fast asleep, Marcus often found himself staring at the stars through the small window above his bed. The memories of Kailani were like ghosts, haunting him in the quiet moments. They had met 5 years ago in one of the galaxy's bustling trade hubs, where Marcus had been working as a starship mechanic. Kailani had been a Tavani diplomat, her presence commanding and otherworldly. What had begun as a chance encounter over a malfunctioning translator had quickly turned into something far deeper. Kailani had been both enchanting and enigmatic. She spoke of her people's traditions, their deep connection to the universe's energy fields, and their nomadic ways. But she had also been guarded, revealing little about her past or the pressures she faced as a diplomat. Their love had been intense, a whirlwind of passion and connection that defied the barriers of species and culture. When Kailani had become pregnant, Marcus had been overjoyed. He had envisioned a life where they could raise their child together, blending their worlds into something beautiful. But those dreams had shattered the day Kailani disappeared. She had left without explanation, taking only a small bag of belongings and leaving behind a cryptic note. "I'm sorry, Marcus. This is something I must do. Please protect her." Alara's growing curiosity. Alara was growing quickly, both physically and mentally. At just 3 years old, she already spoke in full sentences, her inquisitive nature driving her to ask questions that Marcus often struggled to answer. "Daddy?" she asked one morning, her luminous eyes peering up at him as they sat at the breakfast table. "Where is Mommy?" The question hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. It wasn't the first time she had asked, but it never got easier to answer. "She had to leave, sweetheart," he said gently, brushing a strand of silvery hair from her face. "But she loved you very much. Will she come back?" Alara's voice was hopeful, her small hands clutching her cup of nutrient blend. "I don't know," Marcus admitted, his throat tightening, "but I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." Alara seemed to accept this, though her eyes lingered on his face as if searching for a truth he couldn't give her. A sudden visitor. Life in Sequoia Ridge was predictable, almost monotonous. But one evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the forest was bathed in twilight, Marcus heard a knock at the door. Visitors were rare, and Marcus's brow furrowed as he approached the door, wiping his hands on a rag. He opened it cautiously, expecting to see one of the villagers. Instead, he was met with a sight that froze him in place. Standing on the doorstep, her figure framed by the fading light, was Kelani. Her silvery hair cascaded over her shoulders, and her lavender skin shimmered faintly in the dim glow. But she looked different, tired, thinner, her once confident posture weighed down by something unseen. "Marcus," she said softly, her voice trembling. I've come back." For a moment, Marcus couldn't speak. A storm of emotions churned within him: shock, anger, confusion, and a flicker of something he wasn't ready to name. Kaylani's eyes filled with tears as she took a step closer. "I know I don't deserve it, but please, I need to explain." Marcus's voice was cold, his hands clenched at his sides. "You left, Kaylani. You left us. Do you have any idea what that did to me?" To her. Kaylani flinched at his words, her gaze dropping. "I had no choice. I can't explain everything, but I was protecting you both." "Protecting us?" Marcus's voice rose. "By abandoning us?" Before Kaylani could respond, a small voice interrupted. "Mommy." Both adults turned to see Alara standing in the doorway, her eyes wide with disbelief. Kaylani's breath caught, and tears streamed down her face as she dropped to her knees. "Alara," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Oh, my little star." Alara hesitated, then ran to her mother, wrapping her small arms around her neck. Kaylani sobbed as she held her daughter close, whispering words of love and apology. Marcus watched the scene unfold, his emotions a tangled mess. Part of him wanted to pull Kaylani away, to demand answers, to shield Alara from the pain he knew was coming. But another part of him, part he hated to admit, wanted to believe her, to hope that there was an explanation that could make sense of the past 3 years. For now, he said nothing. The storm of emotions could wait. All that mattered in this moment was Alara, her small frame cradled in her mother's arms, and the fragile threads of a family that had been broken. Chapter 2. The Weight of the Past. A Shattered Piece. Kaylani's unexpected return upended the fragile piece Marcus had worked so hard to build. The sight of her kneeling in the doorway, holding Alara and weeping, was a scene Marcus had dreamed of and dreaded in equal measure. The emotions surging within him, anger, betrayal, hope, and longing, were almost too much to bear. After a few long moments, Marcus cleared his throat, his voice sharp. "Get inside before someone sees you." Kaylani looked up at him, her lavender eyes glistening with tears. She nodded, rising to her feet, while still holding Alara close. Alara's tiny arms wrapped around her mother's neck, as though she were afraid to let go. The door shut behind them with a heavy thud, and Marcus motioned toward the modest living room. "Sit," he said, his tone colder than he intended. Kaylani obeyed, settling onto the worn couch with Alara still in her arms. Marcus remained standing, arms crossed as he leaned against the wall, his piercing gaze fixed on her. "You owe me an explanation," he said bluntly. 3 years, Kaylani. 3 years of silence. And now you just show up? What the hell happened? Kaylani winced at his words, her composure faltering. She placed Alara gently on the couch beside her, brushing a strand of silvery hair from the child's face. "You're right," she said softly. "You deserve the truth." Her story. Kaylani took a deep breath, her hands trembling as she began to speak. "The day I left, Marcus, I didn't want to go. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. But staying with you and Alara would have put you both in danger." "Danger?" Marcus's voice was incredulous. "From what?" "My people," Kaylani said, her voice tinged with bitterness. "The Tavani Council. They never approved of me being with you. They saw our relationship as a stain on our bloodline. And when Alara was born, they considered her an abomination." Marcus's fists clenched. "An abomination? She's your daughter, Kaylani. How could they dash?" Kaylani cut him off, her tone urgent. "You don't understand. The Tavani are a proud race, Marcus. They value purity above all else. When they discovered I was pregnant, they threatened to take her from me. To dispose of her." Marcus's stomach turned at the implication. "Dispose of her? You mean kill her?" Kalani nodded, tears streaming down her face. I couldn't let that happen, so I fled. I thought I could hide here with you, but the council's reach is vast. They sent hunters after me. I knew if I stayed, they'd find us. They'd hurt you both. Her voice broke, and she looked down at her hands. I left to draw them away, to give you and Alara a chance to live in peace. Marcus stared at her, his anger warring with understanding. You could have told me, he said finally. We could have faced it together. Kalani shook her head. No, you don't know what the council is capable of. They would have stopped at nothing to destroy us. I had to keep you in the dark. It was the only way to protect you. Marcus's anger. Marcus paced the room, his emotions boiling over. And what about now, Kalani? Why come back after 3 years? What's changed? Kalani hesitated, her hands gripping the fabric of her dress. I thought I'd destroyed the hunters, that I'd bought enough time for you to live safely. But the council is relentless. I've heard whispers they've found this sector. It's only a matter of time before they come for Alara. Marcus's blood ran cold. So you're saying the danger you ran from is still out there? That it's coming here? Yes, Kalani said, her voice trembling, but I'm not running this time. I've spent the last 3 years preparing training, gathering resources. I've come back to protect her, to protect both of you. Marcus laughed bitterly, shaking his head. Protect us? You left us, Kalani. You don't just get to show up and play hero. Kalani flinched at his words, but she didn't back down. I know I've hurt you, Marcus, and I'll never forgive myself for leaving. But everything I did was to keep you and Alara safe. Please, give me a chance to make it right. Alara's confusion. Throughout the conversation, Alara had been quietly observing, her luminous eyes darting between her parents. She finally spoke, her small voice cutting through the tension. Daddy, are you mad at Mommy? Marcus froze, his heart aching at the innocent question. He knelt in front of Alara, his voice softening. No, sweetheart. I'm just trying to understand. Is Mommy staying with us now? Alara asked, hope flickering in her voice. Marcus glanced at Kalani, who met his gaze with a mixture of hope and fear. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. For now, he said reluctantly, we'll figure this out. Alara beamed, throwing her arms around Marcus's neck. Thank you, Daddy. Marcus hugged her tightly, his resolve hardening. Whatever anger he felt toward Kalani, his priority was clear, keeping Alara safe. A plan of action. That night, as Alara slept peacefully in her room, Marcus and Kalani sat at the kitchen table. The tension between them was palpable, but they both knew they had to set aside their differences to face the threat looming over them. We need to be ready, Kalani said. The council's hunters are relentless. They'll come for her as soon as they find out she's here. Marcus nodded, his jaw tight. I've fortified the house as best I can, but if they're as powerful as you say, we'll need more than that. Kalani reached into a small satchel she had brought with her, pulling out a sleek device. This is a Tavani shield generator. It can create a protective barrier around the house, but it'll only hold for a short time. Marcus studied the device, his engineering mind already analyzing its design. It's a start, but we'll need to take the fight to them eventually. Waiting for them to find us is a death sentence. Kalani hesitated before nodding. I have contacts people who oppose the council. If we can reach them, we might have a chance to fight back. Marcus met her gaze, his expression hard. Then we fight. For Alara. Kalani's eyes softened, and for the first time, a flicker of their old connection passed between them. For Alara, she agreed. The calm before the storm. The house was quiet as the two of them worked late into the night, preparing for the battle they knew was coming. Marcus couldn't help but steal glances at Kalani as she worked, her movements precise and deliberate. She was still the woman he had fallen in love with, but the years had changed her. There was a hardness in her eyes now, a weariness that spoke of the sacrifices she had made. As they finished setting up the shield generator, Marcus finally spoke. If we survive this, what happens then? Are you going to disappear again? Kalani looked at him, her expression unreadable. I don't want to leave again, Marcus, but I know I've lost your trust. I can only hope to earn it back. Marcus didn't reply. Instead, he turned his attention back to the generator, his thoughts a whirlwind of uncertainty. For now, Survival was all that mattered. The rest would have to wait. Chapter 3. The Hunters Arrive. The calm before the storm. The morning after Kaylani's return, the air around Sequoia Ridge was unnervingly still. Marcus stood in the yard, staring at the tree line that marked the edge of the village. The Tavani shield generator hummed softly in the background, casting a faint, shimmering barrier around the house. Despite the calm, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that their time was running out. Inside, Kaylani was preparing Alara for the day. The little girl giggled as her mother braided her silvery hair, her innocent joy a stark contrast to the tension hanging in the air. It had been so long since Alara had felt her mother's touch, and she seemed determined to make the most of every moment. "Are you staying forever, Mommy?" Alara asked, her luminous eyes filled with hope. Kaylani paused, her hands stilling for a moment before she forced a smile. "I'll do everything I can to stay with you, my little star." Alara beamed, oblivious to the weight of her mother's words. Marcus entered the house, his expression grim. "We don't have much time," he said. "We need to be ready." Kaylani nodded, her demeanor shifting into something more focused. "I'll finish setting the traps around the perimeter. You keep an eye on Alara." Marcus hesitated, his eyes lingering on her. "Kaylani, if they get through the barrier dash—" "They won't," she interrupted, her voice firm. "I won't let them." The first signs of danger. By midday, the tension reached a breaking point. Marcus was in the workshop, fine-tuning the shield generator to ensure it could withstand a prolonged attack. Kaylani patrolled the perimeter, her sharp eyes scanning the forest for any signs of movement. The first sign came in the form of a faint, high-pitched whine. It was barely audible at first, but it grew louder, accompanied by the unmistakable hum of Tavani technology. Kaylani froze, her heart pounding. She activated her communicator, her voice urgent. "Marcus, they're here." Marcus dropped his tools, rushing to the main console. The shield generator's sensors lit up, displaying multiple incoming signatures. "How many?" "3, Kaylani replied. "Scout ships. They're testing the defenses." Marcus cursed under his breath. "Get back here. We'll hold them off together." Kaylani hesitated, her gaze fixed on the sky. 3 sleek, silver ships appeared above the treetops, their engines emitting a low, menacing hum. "No," she said finally. "If I can draw them away from the house, it'll buy you more time." Kaylani dash. "Trust me, Marcus," she said, cutting him off. "Protect Alara. That's all that matters." Before Marcus could argue, Kaylani took off toward the forest, her lithe form disappearing into the shadows. A desperate defense. As the scout ships approached, the shield generator activated, sending ripples of energy across the barrier. The first ship fired a volley of plasma bolts, which fizzled harmlessly against the shield. But Marcus knew the barrier wouldn't hold forever. He turned to Alara, who was playing quietly in the living room. "Sweetheart, I need you to stay in your room, okay? Don't come out until I tell you." Alara looked up, her eyes wide with concern. "Is it the bad people, Daddy?" Marcus forced a reassuring smile. "Everything's going to be fine. Just stay where it's safe." She nodded reluctantly, retreating to her room as Marcus locked the door behind her. He returned to the workshop, where he activated the house's automated defenses. Turrets emerged from concealed panels, targeting the ships as they circled overhead. The turrets fired, their plasma rounds striking one of the ships and sending it spiraling into the trees. The remaining 2 ships adjusted their tactics, hovering just out of range as they continued to probe the shield. "Come on," Marcus muttered, his hands tightening around the controls. "Let's see what you've got." Kaylani's sacrifice. Meanwhile, Kaylani moved through the forest with practiced precision. She had spent years evading the Tavani Council's hunters, and she knew their tactics well. Her goal was simple: draw the scouts away from the house and disable them before they could report back. The first ship followed her movements, its sensors locking onto her heat signature. Kaylani darted between the trees, her agility and familiarity with the terrain keeping her just out of reach. When the ship slowed to adjust its trajectory, she struck. Leaping onto a low branch, Kaylani aimed her energy pistol and fired at the ship's propulsion system. The shot hit its mark, and the ship lurched to one side before crashing into the forest floor. Kaylani wasted no time, sprinting toward the next target. The second ship, however, was prepared. It fired a burst of plasma in her direction, forcing her to dive for cover. The heat from the blast singed her arm, but she gritted her teeth and kept moving. "Marcus," she said through the communicator, her voice strained. "One down. 2 more to go." "Get back here," Marcus replied. "The shield's holding, but not for long." Kailani didn't answer. She was already charging toward the second ship, determined to end the fight before it reached her family. The final stand. Back at the house, the shield generator began to flicker, its energy reserves dwindling. Marcus's heart raced as the remaining ship intensified its assault, its plasma bolts leaving scorch marks on the barrier. "Come on, Kailani," he muttered under his breath. "Where are you?" Just as the shield collapsed, a deafening explosion shook the ground. Marcus looked up to see one of the ships engulfed in flames, Kailani standing atop a hill with her energy pistol raised. She had managed to disable the second scout, but the effort had left her visibly exhausted. The final ship turned its attention to her, its weapons charging for a final strike. Kailani's eyes met Marcus's through the smoke and chaos, and she shouted into the communicator. "Marcus, take care of her." "No," Marcus yelled, his voice raw with desperation. "Get out of there." Kailani smiled faintly, her expression one of peace. "This is how I make it right." Before Marcus could stop her, Kailani unleashed a surge of energy from a device strapped to her wrist. The blast overloaded the final ship systems, sending it crashing to the ground. But the explosion knocked Kailani off her feet, her body disappearing into the smoke. Aftermath. When the dust settled, Marcus raced into the forest, his heart pounding. He found the wreckage of the ships and, nearby, Kailani lying motionless among the trees. Her breathing was shallow, and her lavender skin was marred with burns. "Kailani," Marcus said, kneeling beside her. "Stay with me." She opened her eyes, her gaze soft as she looked at him. "Is Elara safe?" "She's safe," Marcus said, his voice breaking. "You saved her." Kailani smiled faintly, her hand reaching up to touch his face. "I'm sorry. For everything." Tears streamed down Marcus's face as he held her close. "Don't you dare leave us again." Kailani's eyes fluttered closed, but her breathing steadied. She wasn't gone not yet. A new beginning. Over the following weeks, Marcus worked tirelessly to nurse Kailani back to health. The attack had left her weakened, but she was alive, and that was all that mattered. Together, they fortified their home, determined to protect Elara from any future threats. As the family sat together one evening, watching the stars through the window, Kailani placed a hand on Marcus's. "Thank you for giving me another chance." Marcus squeezed her hand, his voice steady. "We're a family. We face everything together." Elara climbed onto her mother's lap, her laughter filling the room. For the first time in years, Marcus felt a sense of hope, a belief that, no matter what came next, they would face it as one. Chapter 4. A Family Reforged. Kailani's Recovery. The days following the attack were a whirlwind of tension and quiet determination. Marcus and Elara worked tirelessly to care for Kailani as she recovered from her injuries. Her lavender skin, marred by burns and cuts, slowly began to heal under Marcus's meticulous attention and Elara's innocent, loving presence. The Tavani shield generator, though partially damaged, was repaired and fortified, ensuring their home would remain a safe haven for now. Kailani's condition was fragile, but her spirit seemed stronger than Marcus had ever seen it. She spent her waking hours talking with Elara, answering her daughter's endless questions about her homeworld, her people, and why she had left. These moments were bittersweet. Kailani's joy in reconnecting with Elara was tempered by the guilt of her absence. Marcus, meanwhile, buried his lingering anger beneath a layer of practicality. He focused on fortifying their defenses, scouring nearby villages for supplies, and working late into the night in his workshop. But his unresolved feelings toward Kailani simmered just beneath the surface. A heart-to-heart. One evening, as Elara slept peacefully in her room, Marcus found Kailani sitting on the porch, gazing at the stars. The faint glow of her Tavani heritage reflected in her eyes, and for a moment, Marcus was reminded of the woman he had fallen in love with years ago. "You should be resting," Marcus said, stepping out onto the porch. Kailani smiled faintly, not turning to look at him. "I've rested enough. Besides, I miss the stars. They always made me feel connected. Marcus sat down beside her, the silence between them heavy. Finally, he spoke. I'm trying, Kaylani, for Alara's sake. But it's not easy. I know, Kaylani replied, her voice soft. I hurt you, Marcus. I hurt both of you. I don't expect forgiveness overnight. I'm just grateful you gave me this chance. Marcus looked at her, his expression conflicted. You were trying to protect us. I get that. But you could have trusted me. We could have faced it together. Kaylani turned to him, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I was afraid of losing you both. I thought I was doing the right thing, but all I did was abandon the people I loved most. Marcus sighed, running a hand through his hair. We've all made mistakes, but if we're going to make this work, we need to face what's coming together. No more secrets. Kaylani nodded, her hand reaching out to cover his. No more secrets. A warning from the past. The peace didn't last long. Late one night, as Marcus and Kaylani worked in the workshop, the shield generator emitted a sharp, high-pitched alert. Marcus rushed to the console, his heart sinking as he read the incoming data. What is it? Kaylani asked, her voice tense. Another signal, Marcus said grimly. Bigger this time. They found us. Kaylani's face hardened. The council must have sent an extraction team. They won't stop until they have Alara or destroy her. Alara, awakened by the commotion, appeared in the doorway, clutching her stuffed toy. What's happening? She asked, her voice small. Marcus knelt down, his hands on her shoulders. We've got some bad people coming, sweetheart. But don't worry, we are going to keep you safe. Kaylani knelt beside him, her voice firm but gentle. Listen to your father, Alara. Do exactly as we say, and everything will be fine. The final battle. As the extraction team's ship descended through the atmosphere, Marcus and Kaylani activated every defense they had. Automated turrets powered up, the shield generator flared to maximum capacity, and Marcus armed himself with the plasma weapons he had scavenged over the years. Kaylani, despite her injuries, stood ready with her Tavani energy staff, a relic from her people, imbued with the power of her lineage. She turned to Marcus, her expression fierce. This ends tonight. The first wave of attackers, a squad of heavily armed Tavani soldiers, hit the shield with a barrage of energy blasts. The barrier held, but Marcus knew it wouldn't last long. He and Kaylani coordinated their attacks, using the turrets to thin the enemy ranks while Kaylani's precise strikes disabled their vehicles. Alara watched from the safety of a reinforced room, her small hands pressed against the window. Despite her fear, she whispered, "You can do it, Mommy and Daddy." As the battle raged on, Marcus and Kaylani fought side by side, their movements synchronized in a way that spoke to their deep connection. Kaylani's energy staff crackled with power as she deflected incoming blasts, while Marcus's steady aim took down soldier after soldier. But the extraction team wasn't the only force at play. The council had sent a hunter-class commander, a towering Tavani warrior clad in advanced armor. He emerged from the ship with a menacing presence, his voice amplified through a helmet. "Kaylani," he called, his tone cold. "You cannot protect her forever. Surrender the child, and you may yet live." Kaylani's grip tightened on her staff. "You'll never have her." The commander lunged, his energy blade slicing through the air. Kaylani met him head-on, their weapons clashing in a flurry of sparks. Marcus provided cover, firing at the advancing soldiers to keep them from flanking her. The fight was brutal. Kaylani's movements were swift and precise, but the commander's strength and skill were formidable. It wasn't until Marcus managed to disable the commander's armor with a well-placed shot that Kaylani landed the final blow, her energy staff piercing his chest. The remaining soldiers, seeing their leader fall, retreated to their ship. Marcus and Kaylani watched as the ship ascended, its engines roaring into the night sky. A new beginning. The morning after the battle, Sequoia Ridge was quiet once more. The defenses had held, but the toll was evident in the scorched ground and the battered figures of Marcus and Kaylani. As they sat on the porch, Alara climbed onto Kaylani's lap, her tiny arms wrapping around her mother's neck. "You're not leaving again, are you?" she asked softly. Kaylani hugged her tightly, her voice breaking. "No, my little star. I'm staying. Forever." Marcus watched them, a faint smile on his lips. He reached out, taking Kelani's hand. We'll rebuild. Together. Kelani nodded, her eyes meeting his. Together. As the sun rose over the forest, the small family sat in the warmth of its light, ready to face whatever the future might hold united at last.